what that can lead to is really diving into just in case education versus just in time education. The difference, like for instance, I have listened to a lot of speakers talk about scaling a business from $500,000 to $1 million. This is information that is useful to me in supporting some of my clients, but this is not information that is personally useful to me at this stage of my business. I would be much more suited to training that would tell me how to make my first 150,000. That would be much more appropriate to me. And what I think, you didn't say this, but this is what I see happening, is sometimes if we've spent so much time learning about businesses or solving problems that are 5 steps ahead of us, it actually prevents us from doing the critical steps to get there.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, stuck, or uncertain about how to grow your business without sacrificing what really matters most? Welcome to The Business You Really Want, the show for women ready to build a sustainable, fully aligned business. Aligned with what, you ask? You, your values, your life. Seriously, it is possible. I'm Tonya Kubo, and along with business advisor extraordinaire Gwen Bortner, we're here to show you how.
Have you ever noticed how much business advice you already know? You could probably write a book about what you should be doing in your business, and yet somehow that knowledge is not translating to consistent action. So today, Gwen and I are going to be talking about why just knowing what to do isn't enough, and more importantly, at least for me and for you, how bridging the gap between knowledge and implementation matters most. So my name's Tonya Kubo, joined as always by Gwen Bortner, and today we're tackling this challenge that I think affects almost every business owner, which is that gap between implementation, between knowledge and action. So I would call that the implementation gap. So Gwen, tell me from your perspective how you see this manifest. Clients, yourself, other people, go for it.
Oh, we're just going to use me as my best example.
I was hoping you would do that, but I didn't want to throw you under the bus.
No. I live under the bus. It is so easy, particularly if you're curious. If you like learning things, it is so easy to get caught up in learning the next thing. Mm-hmm. And getting so excited about it. And so, and I'm going to go do it. And usually we will take at least a step toward the thing, mm-hmm. but that's a long ways from actually doing the thing or fully implementing the thing. And for most of us, this is what we would call a squirrel issue, because but before we have a chance to get too much further, there's something new that we find about. And what about that? Oh, and we should go check that out. Oh, and that sounds like that's going to solve this problem. And then we go down to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And like I said, I mean, I'm as guilty as everyone else. I probably do a tiny bit better only because I've become so self-aware of it. Mm-hmm. So like, I will note that I'm actually doing this thing. Doesn't stop me necessarily from doing it, however.
Right.
And because the knowledge is not the same as the action. And, how you open this is so true. Most of us know lots and lots of things. Sometimes, though, what we don't know is actually how to do the thing.
Tell me more about that.
Well, so I'll use where I bring, where how you and I work together. Mm-hmm. I understand a lot about marketing. I have read more about marketing than a lot of people have, mm-hmm. because I felt very inadequate in my marketing knowledge. And so I would read and 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 read and, all the times. And various things I would try, but I often didn't really understand what it was trying to do or mm-hmm. what the details were in getting it mm-hmm. implemented. And I would get frustrated pretty early on, pretty consistently. Mm-hmm. And so then I'd figure, well, that's not working. I'm going to go try something else. And I think that's the case for a lot of us, because I think a lot of us get knowledge in what I'm going to call snippets. So snippets being a book, a keynote, a class, anything where we're getting a piece of it. And often what we hear is we hear that and it's like, oh, I know what that means. And we go to start to do it. But the reality is we really don't know what that means. We know a little bit of what that means, but being able to get beyond just that entry level, that starting point, is so much harder.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Sorry. Like 5 different things just went through my head. So, what you talked about, I think one piece that's important is we as entrepreneurs, I think a lot of us are attracted to entrepreneurship because it rewards us for growth, right? If you are like bottom of the ladder in a corporate environment, nobody wants you to get too big for your britches. They want you to be at that lower level. But as an entrepreneur, you are rewarded, or at least you're complimented on the books you read, the spaces you're in. And what that can lead to is really diving into just in case education versus just in time education. The difference, like for instance, I have listened to a lot of speakers talk about scaling a business from $500,000 to $1 million. This is information that is useful to me in supporting some of my clients, but this is not information that is personally useful to me at this stage of my business. I would be much more suited to training that would tell me how to make my first 150,000. That would be much more appropriate to me. And what I think, you didn't say this, but this is what I see happening, is sometimes if we've spent so much time learning about businesses or solving problems that are 5 steps ahead of us, it actually prevents us from doing the critical steps to get there.
That is gold. It's absolute gold, because I think that's true. And we don't realize that sometimes those initial steps are actually the most critical steps, because it's like, well, but I want to have $1 million business. So I'm going to act like I have $1 million business. Sorry, people, that is not the way this game works. There's other foundational things that have to be in place for that to happen. And sometimes those foundational pieces are, well, almost always, they are way less sexy. They are way less fun. They are way less, all of the things that the education, the book, the conversation is talking about. And it's like, yeah, but if I just keep doing that thing, then I'm going to get there. It's like, yeah, you're not going to get there, because it's assuming these other 6 steps have already happened. And you've only done one of those 6 steps. And you just, there's certain things you just can't skip. Or if you do, you're going to pay a giant price in a different way later.
Oh my gosh, that is so true. It made me think of, I was in like a workshop for writers, and there was one individual who was really struggling on a specific story. Should the story be in chapter 3 or should the story be in chapter 7? And the facilitator asked, asked some questions, kind of like transition paragraphs and what did you write before? And what had come out is this person had not written any words. And the facilitator was like, you're spending an awful lot of time organizing chapters that don't exist yet. What you should be doing is just writing the words out. You can always organize them later. And I think, what you're bringing up is how we can do this in business.
Absolutely. That is a beautiful example, because that's exactly the thing of, but I want it to be perfect when I get there. Well, Sorry, it doesn't ever get to be perfect when you get there. That's not the way it works. And you have to have all of the messy middle.
Yeah. And the messy middle, I don't think people appreciate how many valuable lessons live in the messy middle.
Oh yeah. The messy middle is super, super important. It's not fun. It's messy, but there are huge amounts of learning that happen in the messy middle. Huge amounts.
Yeah. Can you think of something that you learned in a messy middle?
Oh gosh. technically I should be able to, think of 1,000 things that I've
Sometimes you can think of so many, though, you can't think of one.
Yeah, no, exactly. So, okay, so one of the messy middle things is that cash flow really, really matters all the time. That, early on in one of my businesses, I did not pay attention to the cash flow issue. I just kept thinking, yeah, but if I sell more, it's going to take care of itself. And it's like, no, that's not actually the way that it works. It feels like it should work that way, but there were other issues that related to the cash flow that were preventing that from being a true statement. And,
Okay, that's a good example.
And so that's one just right, that I can think of right off the top of my head. But yeah, the messy middle always has lessons that we have to learn. A lot of times the messy middle is learning about who are our right people, whether they're our client right people or our employees, support people, contractors, however you want to describe them, right people. And understanding that right people definition changes over time.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking like from a marketing perspective, right? Messy middle stuff, messaging. I can't even tell you how many people I've talked to over the years who've been like, well, one day when I'm a grown-up business owner, I'm not going to trip over my words. One day when I'm a grown-up business owner, I'll have this nailed. And I'm like, oh, you're so cute. First of all, tell me what you mean when you say grown-up business owner, because I will tell you that this is an ongoing struggle for everybody all the time. Because even if your offer doesn't change, even if your business doesn't change, how people respond to how you talk about it evolves over time. It evolves with current events. It evolves just with how society evolves. So, those are one of those things that you've never arrived. And the only way to truly get that intersection with your ideal client is to continue testing it over time and to pay attention when it works, how long it's working, and then you have to pay close attention when it stops working. It's not one of those parts of your business that you get to put on a shelf. So Gwen, we've talked about sort of the knowledge gap or the implementation gap as it relates to getting too far ahead of ourselves with our business. But now I'd like to shift our focus a little bit to the business owner that knows what they should be doing right now, is accurately describing what they should be doing right now, but they're just not doing it. What do you think gets in their way?
There's typically, and these are things that we see pop up all the time in our weekly accountability process, the weekly course of action. Yeah. We see it on different people's sheets at different times with, different specifics, but it really boils down to these pieces. So one of them is, I know what I need to be doing, but I actually truly don't know the action to take, right? So I'm going to just work on bookkeeping because everyone has to deal, it's a common problem.
Right.
Right. So I know I need to be doing my bookkeeping, but I'm not really doing it on a regular basis. Well, why is that? Right. We have to start digging into it, but often it's because I'm not sure how to choose the right software application to start using to do the accounting. Once I get past that, then I may be able to start doing the things that I need to do. But that's a legitimate concern because there's not just one option out there. There's multiple options and they all have pros and cons and, all of the rest of it. So sometimes we know we need to be using the accounting system. This is not rocket science by a long shot, but we actually don't know how to take that first step. So that's one issue. Another and related to that, but I'm going to keep it as one, is that perfectionist of what if I make a wrong decision? Okay. And my answer always is we can make another decision later on. That's always my answer. There's very few things that we can't undecide or redecide at another point in time. So that's one piece. Another piece is and we just talked about energy in our last podcast, but it's like, I just don't have energy for this thing. It's not something that I'm comfortable with. It's not something I enjoy. It's not something fill in the blank. Back to bookkeeping, a perfect example for most people. And so unless I am forced to do it by some outside driver, often in the business world, it is tax time, right? Then I'll actually sit down and do all of the work that I have to do because I have to do it. There are legal ramifications. There are serious issues, but to maintain it on a week to week or month to month basis, there is no major ramification in my world that I acknowledge. I would argue that there's always a major ramification in your world around bookkeeping, but that I'm willing to acknowledge. And so I just find other things that need to be done because we're entrepreneurs. The list is long.
The list, let's be real, the list never ends.
The list never ends. So it's really easy to say, oh, I'll get to that later. And later doesn't come until there really is some sort of, very, very hard deadline. And then the third reason, which is related to both of those two, is not having a method of accountability. And when I say accountability, we're talking about our definition of accountability, true accountability, which is saying, so what's keeping you from doing this? Right? Because that question actually helps you figure out, are you in column 1 or column 2?
Yeah.
Right. And depending on what the answer is, then we can help you move forward from column 1 or column 2. But it's rarely that we don't really know what to do. It's usually that there's other things that are more interesting to do. And or we don't understand the ramifications of not doing them. We only know, I'm going to keep using bookkeeping, we only know the tax deadline ramification. We don't understand how much is at risk by not keeping track and knowing what our numbers are on a month-to-month basis.
Yeah. Okay. So in thinking of sort of why business owners struggle to implement what they know, right? So it's because they know the what, but they don't always know the how, or
don't always know the how.
They don't know that first step to take in order to do this. And I think that is probably the most profound statement ever, because I think there's so many things that we think we know how to do because we know so much of the what. But when we sit down to do it, it's like, oh, I can't do that until where do I begin? Or we start feeling like it's circular. You talked about perfectionism, right? Being afraid to do it wrong is one that gets us stuck between knowing what to do and actually doing it. Energy, which we talked a lot about in our last episode, but just not having the energy to do it, or not having the energy to think about how to do it, right? Back to step 1 or back to item 1. And then, you brought up a good point with no method of accountability. And I like what you said about, it's not, why didn't this get done? Because that is not a helpful question.
It's not actually a helpful question.
But, what got in the way of it? What prevented it from happening? Because then what that does actually is it opens up a conversation for, there's this other thing that is always emergent, right? Like we'll just say, my kid's school called. That's why I didn't get it done. And I only allocated this time. And it's like, okay, well, your kid's school is calling you 4 times a week. So maybe this needs to be a task that we do when school isn't in session. Or it could be, well, it was, I slept in on day 1. I got a phone call on day 2. I did something else. It's like, okay, so it seems like you might be using anything to get in the way of doing this thing. Not speaking from experience, of course.
Right. We would never
done
experience on these things. You live under the bus with me too.
I do live under the bus with you. But the thing is, right, is that's an entirely different problem to solve than the first problem.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But if the question was, well, why didn't you do the thing? I think we just go, well, because I suck. That's why I didn't do the thing. I didn't do it, I suck.
Our self-talk is so unhelpful when we're struggling to actually take action. The other one, which I didn't mention, and it's a little bit of an offshoot with both of these, and this actually comes from our friend Nick Peterson, but sometimes it's because the data that I've been given doesn't match the data that I live. And what I mean by that is all of the education that I've gotten says when I do A, B, and C, then D is going to happen. And so I do A, B, and C, and D doesn't happen. And then I do A, B, and C, and D still doesn't happen. I do A, B, and C, and D still doesn't happen. And, Nick's answer on that is always your data, meaning your personal data, your ABC, is better than my data, my example of A, B, and C every single solitary time, because back to it's a different version of context matters, right? Because there are all sorts of additional elements that can never be dealt with in a lecture, in a class, in a book that may really be not preventing D from happening, even though you're doing A, B, and C exactly as they said. And like I said, it's a little bit of both 1 and 2 that we used here. And so sometimes the reason we're not doing the next thing is because we're expecting D to happen. And it's like, I can't do E until D happens. And it's like, D's never going to happen.
Right. Okay. That actually, I think, brings us to sort of the next thing that we should be talking about, which is, I think it would be helpful to talk about how, or to share explicit examples of how this implementation gap shows up in different areas of business. So, for example, sales, right? You need to make offers in sales. In order to make offers, you need to have people to make offers too. Yet many times in sales, people don't want to talk to people. I had a friend one time who said everybody is the best salesperson that ever lived until it comes to actually having to pick up the phone and call someone, or actually, approach somebody about, do you want this thing or don't you want this thing? Right. So that's one thing I think, avoiding calls in sales, or maybe even avoiding the follow-up because you don't want to be told no. Where do you see it manifesting in sales?
Oh, I think all of those things really are it, where we have a preconceived notion about our relationship with some salesperson at some point in time, and we are concerned that we are going to be that horrible person. And so that, that can look like all sorts of things, right? My favorite story, and when I fell in love with Matthew Kimberly, was when he was talking about being a sales consultant. And he said, the first thing I'll ask is how many people have you actually made an offer to? And they would say no. And he says, go out and make 100 offers, and call me when you're done. That'll be $1,000, please. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Right. Because sometimes it really is about the basics, but we often will project our experience out into the rest of the world, which isn't necessarily true, because we're, if your experience is what we'll call the classic, slimy used car salesman, you're probably not selling a used car. You're probably not slimy. There's a whole lot of things that are very, very different about it, but yet you get your mindset around that and you say, but if I do anything like ask for the sale, then I'm being that person. It's like, no, you're not. And so our own preconceived notions and our projection of those into the actions is often a really big issue. If you're someone who always wants time to think, you're going to assume all of your clients want time to think.
Right.
That's
a good example.
True.
Yeah.
Right.
Not everybody buys the same.
Not everybody buys the same. And so I think a lot of times that next step we struggle with because we have projected somewhere of our own experience, and almost always a negative experience, into the process. It's really not helpful.
Yeah.
It's not the piece that's providing value. But also sometimes it's not going far enough back in the chain, like you said, because it's not just about making an offer. It's about having someone to make an offer to, and where can you find those people, and how do you get those people?
Right.
That's not just an instant thing. Most people aren't just going to show up on your doorstep and say, "Hey, do you have something I want to buy?" Because,
right, exactly.
That's kind of not the way that it works.
Doesn't work that way.
Right.
Okay, so that's how the implementation gap shows up in sales. So I think we should cover marketing and then finance and operations. Is there another area that you think we should cover?
Systems.
Okay. I always think of systems as operations, but you will be in charge of showing us the difference. So on the marketing side, the knowing versus doing. So first of all, I'm going to say that not all of the marketing tactics people think they should do are actually things they should do. But they're, in terms of, I should write blog articles. Okay, like this is something that I have struggled with in the past for my own business because I do so much writing for clients. I know how SEO works. I know that what I do today will show results on Google and in search traffic 6 months from now. So if I want search traffic 6 months from now, I need to be publishing today. And yet, because I know I'm not going to see the fruits of my labor for 6 months, it's really easy not to do it today. Because in my mind, right, 6 months from today is no different than 6 months from tomorrow. But let's be real. It's like, I'm going to tell myself that every day for 6 months. And now it's going to be a year in advance. So I think that's one thing, is that in marketing, a lot of times we want immediate results. And so we know that it takes 90 to 120 days for anything we do on social media to really develop a trend, for us to truly know what's working. Doesn't mean that you can't put up a post today and sell $10,000. Happens all the time, but it does not happen every single day for most people, right? So we know it takes time, but we want to quit after 5 days because, it's like, yeah, it's just not feeling good. Nobody cares. I don't want to show up for it. And then, I think also people know that they need a clear message. People know that they need to be able to succinctly talk about what they do. And yet they don't want to spend the time doing that because it doesn't feel like there's a point. Give us a finance example.
So a finance example is really the one I did before of I'm going to just put off my bookkeeping because the numbers are what the numbers are. And until I actually have to give them to somebody else, it's fine. And often it's I think I know what the numbers are. Right. And so, people will say, oh yeah, no, I've been doing my bookkeeping enough. I know that my expenses are generally $2,000 a month. I'm making up numbers. Right. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter if I actually get them done on time or not. Well, yeah, that can be true, but it also can be that there are some unexpected expenses that because you're not paying attention, you don't realize that your card has been, is being frauded, mm-hmm. that you're paying for things that ongoing that you actually aren't using. There's, mm-hmm. There's all sorts of bits there. And so it's easy to tell ourselves, oh, we know enough about this that we don't actually need to do the steps. And because I like the numbers, I like doing it, but very few people actually pay as close attention to anything as they think they do. We all think that we have way more detailed knowledge than we actually have. Mm-hmm. Our brain is designed to solve problems, not actually hold knowledge. And because of that, it's like, oh yeah, no, I know how much. And if you ask me at any point in time, I can give you pretty good numbers. But part of it is because I look at my numbers and they're actual numbers on a regular basis. But even so, I'm still usually off some. And I know I'm paying way closer attention than most people are, like by a lot, right? And so I think that we tell ourselves a story of it's not that important, right? Or doing it isn't going to change anything. And true, with bookkeeping, doing the bookkeeping won't actually change the bookkeeping because the bookkeeping is historic. It's already happened. Right. But it can change your behavior going forward. And that's the part that people miss.
Yeah. Okay. So for an operations example, what comes to mind for me is, you need to hire help, but you're not doing it because it feels hard. It feels too big. You don't know where to begin. You don't want to write the job description. There's all these things that get in the way of you hiring the help that you desperately know you need. Do you have another example?
Hiring is a great example of it. The other example I'll give, which is tied closely to operations, is systems. Right? Is the systems piece of it of, well, I don't want to systematize this yet because I may want to make some changes. I'm not sure that it's working exactly the way that I want. This is where the perfectionism piece will come in. We had an experience a while back where it's like, but I have to wait until I find the right tool to do the
Yeah.
thing. I know this is one of your favorite things that you talk about all the time.
Yeah.
I'm not going to systematize things until I figure out, do I want to use Notion or Asana or Monday.com or ClickUp or, fill in the blank. I mean, there's, lots and lots of choices.
Hundreds.
And, the tool is actually not the solution. Tool is, in fact, just the tool.
Right. Exactly.
And so we decide that the reason we can't do the thing is because we're not sure about the tool.
Right.
Right. And fundamentally, all of these are excuses. And, one of the things that I've used for years and years is every excuse is a good one. It is the nature of it being an excuse.
Yeah.
Every excuse is a good one. It's a good excuse. But it still doesn't necessarily solve the problem, move the needle, make you take action.
Okay, so to that point, how do we solve the problem, move the needle, take the action? Like, what do you recommend for the listener who goes, I do that?
So
how do they do it?
My answer is always the same answer. And I, sound like a freaking broken record, but it's accountability. And it's true accountability.
Okay.
Where someone else who cares about you and your business, but is not so wrapped up into the details of it, can hold you accountable. Now, it can be a peer accountability. It can be a paid accountability. It can, there are all sorts of ways that you can be held accountable. But where someone else that you will respect and will respond to, because that's another piece of it, accountability is two-way. If someone's trying to hold you accountable and you're not responding, then that's not accountability. Right. You've got to both play in the game.
Right.
with pretty equal effort. It's not necessarily equal, but pretty equal effort. But the accountability is where you can actually start moving the needle. It can be someone on your team. There are times that I've had you hold me accountable, and I just say, I need you to hold me accountable. And your part of your job is to say, so I see this didn't happen. What's holding you back?
Yeah.
And often in that process, it's like, oh, I'm just scared. I just don't want to do this. I actually don't know what the next step is. But any of those things, then we're able to work together to figure out, okay, how do we get past this thing, whatever it is.
Okay, so I heard that, but like, why? Why do I need somebody else? Why can't I just do this myself? I'm almost 50 years old, Gwen. Like, shouldn't I have arrived?
I'm way older than that, and I still need to be held accountable, because here's the answer. If you could do it, you would have already done it, girlfriend.
Hate it when you are right. That sucks.
Because it's the same for me.
Right.
It's not that I can't do it, because that's not true either. Sometimes it's like, I don't know why I'm not doing this thing. Like, I actually have all the skills, all the knowledge. There is no logical reason for me to not do it. And it's not even like I hate it or, any of the rest of it. But that accountability helps me process through, why is it not happening?
Right. And,
and sometimes the answer is because you don't actually need to do it.
Right. Like, it doesn't need to be done. You don't want to do it. And, I know I'm like poking fun. It's a little self-deprecating here. But I think whether conscious or unconscious, most of us think by this age, whatever age we are, we should have figured it out by now. And there's something wrong with us. We're some kind of failure if we can't make ourselves do the thing. So your advice is, you need to invite somebody else to hold you accountable. And again, could be a peer, could be a paid professional, doesn't matter, because, and I'll add this, you did not say this, problem is we could talk ourselves into anything. Like you said, if you could hold yourself accountable, you would have done the thing already. And I'll say, like, to your point earlier about excuses, like, I know how to convince myself of things.
Oh, we're good at it.
Right?
Yeah.
So anything else you think listeners need to know on the topic before we close up?
No, I really feel like that's the first of being really aware that knowledge is not the same as action, and understanding that knowledge in and of itself isn't actually useful.
Right.
Right. It is the taking action of it. And that sometimes we can and sometimes we can't. And if there is a gap between the knowledge and the implementation, it really is the question to ask yourself, why is that happening? Is it because I really don't know the step? Is it because I don't actually want to do the thing? Is it because it's not actually appropriate for me to be doing it at all? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It seemed like a good idea, but it doesn't actually apply for,
Mm-hmm.
who I am, where my business is,
Yeah.
all of the things. And then understanding, given that, then what is the action I'm going to take? If it doesn't actually apply, that's easy. Then just stop thinking you're going to do it.
Easy peasy done.
Easy peasy done. But the other ones often really do take some form of accountability. They need someone that you need some help to be able to move forward. And that's okay. It's part of the reason that we are a communal species, because we do need help from one another. We do need support from one another. And that's not a weakness. It's not a problem. And if you really go deep, you'll discover that almost all of the very most successful people have a really strong support environment and accountability network in some form or fashion. They are not doing it alone.
And that is our mic drop moment. Because that is where, people, I think we just think everybody else has it figured out better than we do. And everybody else is doing it all by themselves. And here we are struggling. And the truth is, very few successful people, if any, got there all alone. For most people, they got from there to here through support and accountability, because those two things combined, because that's the other thing, right? Support and accountability are not the same thing. And ideally, you find an accountability partner who understands how to support you without enabling you. And that is why we have Insight to Impact, which is our weekly accountability subscription, which can help you gain clarity on your business one reflection at a time. So every Friday, you receive a thought-provoking question from Gwen, which is designed to help you examine a specific aspect of your business. And when you respond, you get personal feedback to help you implement positive changes that create sustainable, consistent performance around your business. Head over to everydayeffectiveness.com/impact to learn more, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to The Business You Really Want with Gwen Bortner. I'm Tonya Kubo, reminding you that sustainable success is within reach. Make sure to subscribe to the show and visit thebusinessyoureallyWant.com for more resources. Until next time, keep dreaming big and acting with intention.